Today we're bringing you 7 billionaires you didn't even know had a criminal history. Hey, and welcome to another episode of The More You Know. And if you thought philanthropist and software developer Bill Gates was your average law-abiding rich guy, you'll be shocked when you discover his crimes at number 1. Just because you're super rich doesn't mean you're immune to breaking the laws. Some of the tycoons on today's list had some petty little run-ins with the law, while others committed some seriously sizable crimes. One of these guys tried to steal a Picasso on his boat, and another even managed to land the president of his own country in jail. So let's take a look at some of these billionaires and some of the questionable choices they made that landed them on today's list, shall we? Number 7. Jamie Bolton.
Former bank president has been sentenced to 18 months jail for trying to smuggle a Picasso masterpiece.
Jamie Bolton is worth $1.7 billion due to his shareholding in the Spanish banking group Bankinter. But these days, he's better known as the guy who tried to smuggle a Picasso out of Spain on his super yacht. The painting is known as the head of a young woman, and despite a 2015 high court ruling labeling it a national treasure that couldn't be removed from the country, the Spanish billionaire kept it on board in his 213-foot yacht as he sailed to the French island of Corsica, from which he'd allegedly organized a private jet to smuggle it over to Switzerland, where he intended to sell it. Authorities were tipped off and caught Bolton in the French Mediterranean, where the painting was confiscated and transferred to the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid, where it now remains as property of the state. Bolton was ordered to pay an incredible $101.2 million fine, which is almost 4 times the painting's worth, and must now serve 3 years in jail. Quite a hefty sentence considering it's his first offense, but as the saying goes, go big or go home. Thought that was crazy? Wait until you hear about Bill Gates running with the law at number 1. Number 6. S. Curtis Johnson. Curtis Johnson is the great-great-grandson of Samuel Curtis Johnson, the founder of the multi-billion-dollar family-owned cleaning products giant SC Johnson & Sons. You're probably more familiar with the insecticide Raid, the toilet detergent Duck, and the infamous surface cleaner Mr. Muscle, which are just a few of the brands owned by the almost 150-year-old American multinational.
I'd like to deeply apologize to my stepdaughter and my wife, Tracy, for the tremendous hurt that I've caused.
In 2011, one of the cleaning company's dirty little secrets was exposed when Johnson was charged with the repeated sexual assault of his then teenage stepdaughter, which could have kept him locked up for 40 years. But the teen refused to give up her medical records, and after a 3-year litigation battle, Johnson took a plea deal. He pled guilty to misdemeanor charges of 4th-degree sexual assault and disorderly conduct in exchange for only 4 months in jail and a $6,000 fine. He only ended up serving 3. And although the case was put to rest, it definitely stained the Johnson family name, whose company's slogan still questionably reads, "A family company, at work for a better world." Pretty ironic if you ask me. Number 5. Alan Stanford.
Scamster Alan Stanford, the man charged with masterminding a $7 billion investment fraud.
Former financier and sponsor of professional sports Alan Stanford was indicted in 2009 for running a $7 billion Ponzi scheme through his very own Stanford International Bank in Antigua. He is the second largest Ponzi schemer after Bernie Madoff. Alan was denied bail and declared indigent by the court, so all of his assets were frozen and he was represented by a public defender. After a 3-year trial, he was sentenced to 110 years behind bars without parole for wire and mail fraud, obstruction of an investigation, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. He was also required to pay a personal fine of $5.9 billion, most of which was intended to repay the victims of his crimes. But so far, there's been no distribution of those funds to the victims who had invested their savings with Stanford's bank in the hopes of an incredible return on supposedly safe certificates of deposit. To this day, Stanford blatantly claims he's not a thief and never defrauded anybody, to which most of his victims would object, of course.
To lose $1.3 million by someone that absolutely stole the money from me is just horrific.
Alan Stanford is a sociopath.
We have real assets, real people, a real group of companies, and this was no Ponzi scheme.
However, his most controversial statement was when he said, "If I live the rest of my life in prison, I will always be at peace with the way I conducted myself in business." Well, now, with all that time on his hands, he has plenty of time to think about it. Number 4. J.Y. Lee. In 2017, the vice chairman of Samsung Electronics, Jae-Yong Lee, was sentenced in South Korea on bribery charges. In an attempt to win government approval of the massive merger between Samsung, C&T, and Cheil Industries, Lee allegedly bribed the country's then president, confident Choi Soon-sil, with $38 million. The deal, which would have resulted in a massive payday for the Lee family, was eventually tied to the impeachment and imprisonment of South Korea's president at the time, Park Geun-hye. The former president's relationship with her old friend Choi Soon-sil landed her 24 years in jail and a $17 million fine for a string of corruption charges. As for Lee, the Samsung magnate, he denied his wrongdoings and was released on appeal in February 2018 after serving about 11 months in jail. But the case is far from over, as Lee is apparently facing a retrial that could send him back to jail on elevated bribe amounts, including a gift of horses valued at $2.8 million for Choi Soon's daughter, who loves riding. Number 3. Jeffrey Epstein.
This is Jeffrey Epstein's sprawling New Mexico home, known as Zorro Ranch. The compound sits high on a hill. Its gated entrance is shut and monitored by a security camera.
Jeffrey Epstein started off as a young math teacher in the 1970s in New York, only to make a sudden switch into investment banking and later start his own firm, J. Epstein & Co. In 1982, he specifically marketed his services to those with assets worth more than $1 billion and said he operated his company out of the US Virgin Islands for tax reasons. Although the sudden source of his money was obscure, Epstein appeared to be wealthy and highly charitable. He sported a high school circle too, including associates like Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Queen Elizabeth's son, Prince Andrew. However, in 2008, Epstein became a registered sex offender for the solicitation of prostitution involving a minor and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, where he only ended up serving 13 before he was eventually granted a work release. However, in July 2019, he was arrested again and denied bail, this time on charges of sex trafficking.
He raped me. He brought me off the island, actually to his office in St. Thomas, and he actually raped me in his office. He also trapped me in his room on the island.
Epstein died soon in jail. His death was ruled a suicide by the state medical examiner. However, a pathologist hired by Epstein's brother claims his death may have been a homicide. Number 2. Yu Yang. One of China's #1 hedge fund gurus, Yu Yang, was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison for market manipulation and fined a record-breaking $1.6 billion by the Qingdao Intermediate People's Court. The investor amassed a whopping $2.2 billion after founding the ridiculously successful investment of Zexi in 2009. His success came so fast that rumors soon spread he was up to no good. Yu Yang was in fact detained by police in late 2015, just after a stock market rescue scandal brought down senior regulators and executives in state-owned brokerage companies. The Chinese authorities went as far as to seal off the Hangzhou Bay Bridge to arrest Yu, who was later convicted of insider trading and market manipulation to the point of causing a big chunk stock market crash. Yu had allegedly conspired with chairman and senior management of 13 listed companies to take advantage of the inside information to manipulate stock prices and reap massive profits for his accomplices and himself. Number 1. Bill Gates. And at the top of our list, standing here, is none other than Microsoft founder and American business magnate Bill Gates. The software developer was arrested twice, once in 1975 for driving without a license and speeding, and again in 1977 for driving without a license and not stopping at a stop sign. So let's get one thing straight. Mr. Gates does not believe in driving with a license. Although the details are sketchy and records have been lost over time, this killer 70s mugshot of a young Bill Gates lends at least some credibility to the allegations. Also, a spokesperson from Microsoft once commented that Bill Gates does not remember being taken into custody over driving without a license and a traffic violation, adding that it's well known that when Bill was young, he didn't have a very good driving record. Since his minor run-ins with the law, Bill Gates has gone on to become the CEO of Microsoft and one of the world's richest men, amassing a fortune estimated at over $50 billion. He's also come to be known as one of the world's greatest philanthropists. So unlike the others on this list, it doesn't look like he'll be going to jail anytime soon. And that's it for today's video. Which of these billionaires' criminal past surprised you the most? Let us know down in the comment section below. Oh, and if you found this video shocking, you'll definitely love one of the videos that are on the screen right now. Click one and check it out.